Welcome back. This is next to the last section in the personal finance chapter, chapter 8. We're going to talk a little bit about the cost of home ownership, whether it's worth it to you, and also you might want to compare this with the last section where we talked about buying cars. There are a lot of similarities and the formula isn't too much different. So buckle up your seatbelt and let's go. So, home ownership, is that for you? We're going to find, this should sound familiar, computing the monthly payment and the interest costs for a mortgage. Not too much different. Prepare a loan amortization schedule. Say that 3 times real fast, right? Now that is a bit of a deal, but the individual parts are simple. Set up a chart, get started. Next thing you know, once you've got one line done, whatever extra lines you're expected to do are just really trivial. We'll solve problems that you can figure out whether you can afford to spend for a mortgage, because there are some percentages you ought to consider before buying a house. Understand the pros and cons, renting versus buying. Which one really is for you? One of the big deals is, are you good as a homeowner when it comes to fixing small things? I will be very honest, I am not. I have owned 2 homes and I shouldn't have bought either one. I'm not a handy person. Okay, now let's get to your situation. First of all, the mortgage. It's a long-term loan for the purpose of buying a home. The down payment is what you pay before you start the payments. It's a certain percentage of the sale price and it's paid to the seller. The amount of the mortgage, now this is something you might not get correct. So let's call M the mortgage and D the down payment. What's the amount of the mortgage? The mortgage is the amount that you have to actually finance. So the amount of the mortgage is really the mortgage, the sale price minus the down payment. That's the amount of the mortgage. It's what's left that you have to get a loan for. Mortgage brokers will offer to get you a mortgage lender. So they're just sort of agents to help you find the person that's going to give you the money or loan you the money for that house. Fixed rate mortgages. If you asked me about this, I would probably say make sure it's fixed rate, because you don't want to be surprised with the mortgage going up in its rate. Variable rate mortgages are also called adjustable rate mortgages, and they can go up or down depending on what the prime interest rate is. So if you're lucky, maybe it goes down. If you're not so lucky, it can go up. But at least with a fixed rate mortgage, you know what your payment's going to be for the entire 30 years or whatever the length of the mortgage you've got. Now, right off the bat, to get the mortgage, you have to pay points. And by points, we're talking about percentage points. And you pay that when you get the mortgage. You might think of it, it's not, but you can almost think of it as a bribe. The more points you can pay, the lower the rate of your mortgage is going to be. It's a one-time charge, 1% of the loan amount, not the sale price, the loan amount, the mortgage. 2 points means you have to pay 2% of the loan amount at closing. So that's above everything else. Down payment plus the points. But the more points you can pay, the lower your interest rate's going to be, and the less you'll pay in the long run. It's a little bit on the tricky side, but it's just the way it is. There's truth in lending disclosure statement and the annual percentage rate for the mortgage and so on. Escrow account is some money set aside gradually each year to pay the real estate taxes. That way you don't have to worry with them and they get paid along with the insurance. That protects the loaner, not only just you, but the person who's loaning you the money for the mortgage. And payment, of course. You have to make payments. Here's the formula for that. Pause the video and write down the payment formula. This is the amount that you're buying. That's the amount of the mortgage. This is the annual rate. This is how many times a year you're going to make payments. T is the number of years the payments are going to go for, and those are all the items you need. Remember, R is the annual rate, not the monthly rate. So how can you put this together? Well, let's use an example number 1, to see how this all goes together. So make this a little bit personal. Suppose you are buying a home and it's $195,000 after you make negotiations perhaps. The bank requires a 10% down payment, so you need to have 10% of this $195,000 to pay at closing, plus 2 points. And the 2 points will be on that 90% that remains of the cost. Remember, here's the starting amount. You're going to chop into that by 10%, so you only need 90%. And that mortgage amount, let's call that M, you'll multiply that by 2%. That'll be what you have to pay in points at the time of closing. So at closing, you have to pay the 10% down payment plus the 2 points before you get the keys to the house. Now we're going to, for this example, use a 30-year mortgage, which is quite reasonable and quite something that you would see quite often. We're going to use a fixed rate mortgage, so it stays at 7.5%. First of all, we're going to find the required down payment. Remember, that's going to be 10%. We're going to find the amount of the mortgage, so we'll take that down payment, subtract it from the $195,000 to get the amount of the mortgage. Then, remember, you're going to pay the down payment at the closing, plus at the closing, you're going to pay 2% of the mortgage in addition to the down payment. That's at closing, when you meet with everyone and you sign the papers, that sort of thing. At least the way it used to be done. Then you're going to find monthly payment because you know what the mortgage is, you've paid your 2 points, and you might note that doesn't include the escrow taxes and insurance. This payment is before those two. So the escrow taxes and insurance will be on top of the payment, but it would also be paid at the time you make your monthly payment. E, what's the total interest paid over the 30 years? Well, remember, you bought the house for $195,000. You didn't pay it outright, but that's the start. You paid 10% down. That was off the $195,000. Forget the 2 points. That doesn't count toward the total interest. The mortgage, you're going to make payments on the mortgage. We're going to forget the escrow taxes and insurance. It just confuses things too much. Total interest over 30 years. And here's how it goes. So first of all, the down payment. 10% of what you agreed to pay for the house. So at the closing, you're going to bring a check for $19,500. The mortgage itself is the difference between the price and the down payment. In other words, you subtract. Here's the price, and there's a down payment. Subtract those, and that's your mortgage amount. Next, you also need to bring to the closing 2 points. That means another check. But it's not 2 points of the $195,000. It's 2 points of the mortgage. This is the amount you're borrowing, so it's 2% of that. So 2% of the $175,500. There's your second check that you need to bring to closing. So you bring the down payment and the 2 points, and you're going to pay those to the lending institution. Now, the mortgage payment. Well, there's our formula. All you need to do is put the important numbers in there. What's the mortgage for? What rate are you getting from the lending institution? This is typically a monthly payment, so that'd be 12. And T is how many years it's going to last. In this case, 30 years. Put all those in, and you found out what the payment's going to be. So every month you're going to make a check to the lending institution on your mortgage, and you'll make that check for $1,227, and you'll be good for another month. Now, how about the interest? Well, first of all, you're making payments of $1,227 every month, and you're going to make them for 12 months a year, 30 years. You're going to make 360 payments of $1,227. Total? Well, you don't even need the total, although it's $441,720. Subtract the actual mortgage. This is what you were paying off, and this is how much interest you've paid over those 30 years. Now, it could be a little bit scary because you think, oh, I'm just paying the $175,500 plus a little bit of interest. Well, there's a lot of interest. Sorry about that. Over 30 years, this is how much you're paying in interest. So even though you think you're paying $175,000, you're really paying the $175,000 plus the interest. This is money made by the lending institution. That's why they're willing to loan you money for the mortgage. All right, amortization schedules. When the loan is paid off, it's said to be amortized. Excuse the pronunciation if I'm not quite correct there. It means killed off. In other words, you're killing or finishing off the agreement you've made with the lending institution. Every payment's the same, but the interest decreases as you get more and more of the principal paid off. You'll get quite frequently, like I did with my first mortgage, I get a document showing the loan amortization schedule. What that does is it shows you a column for what your payment is, and these with a fixed mortgage will all be the same. You'll also have how much of that payment you're paying in interest, how much you're paying on the principal or the mortgage, and then what you still have to pay, the net. This is what it looks like. Notice at the very top you put the important details like the percentage rate, the amount of the mortgage. Remember, the one we just looked at was $175,000. How many payments? Now you can divide 12 into that, figure out how many payments, how many months, how many years you're going to be making those payments. Monthly payment, there's your monthly payment. 15 years, 0 months. At the end of the 15 years, it ought to all be paid off. And down here on this last column, when you get to the last part, the balance of the loan is $0. So before you actually get started, you owe $130,000 on that house. That's what the lending institution is giving you, or loan to you, excuse me. Payment number. Number one, what's the payment? I'll look up here. The payment is $1,357.50. Part of that is interest, part of that is principal. What you'll notice, and one of the reasons for doing this, is to notice how large this is at the beginning compared with how much you're actually paying off with one payment. As you pay that off, this becomes smaller and this becomes larger. I want you to notice that when you do your loan amortization schedule. So here we go. Payment number one. This is how you create your amortization schedule. First of all, you owe $130,000. So what interest are you paying the first month? Well, it's $130,000, and this is your rate, but it's only per month, so you divide it by 12. So that's the monthly rate. Multiply those two together, and for that payment, this part of it is pure interest. Here's your payment, and all of this is interest. So you're only paying off $328.33 out of what you owe. What's left? Well, you started with owing $130,000. You just paid off $328.33. What's left? You still owe $129,671.67 after the first payment. And then you start back up again. The second time, you'll put the new balance in here, $129,671.67 in there. Everything else will be the same. Do the multiplication, and you'll notice this goes down a tiny bit, and this will go up a tiny bit over the course of your 15-year loan. So we now owe this amount. We'll do the same thing for the second month. This is what we owe after the first payment. There's our annual interest rate. This makes it a monthly rate. So our second payment includes this much interest. How much have we paid off? There's our payment. That's how we how much we paid in interest. And we've gone from about $328 we're paying off last month to paying off $330 or $331 this month. What do we have left to pay? Well, here's what we started before we wrote the check. This is how much actually came off of the mortgage or off the loan, and this is what we owe after the second payment check is sent in. And you can continue doing this. You might want to go over this several times, trying it yourself as you go through this video or look at the slides. Practice with the numbers that you've got. Make sure you're getting them right. And then I'll give you a practice one to take home and write up your own amortization schedule. And perhaps we'll go with payments, I'm just guessing, payment number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe as far down as 6. It takes a lot of arithmetic, frankly. This is to give you an idea of how the interest payments change, how the principal changes, and how the balance goes down so slowly for a while until finally you have a balance of 0, and that's when you really own your home. After making 3 mortgage payments, frankly, you do not own your home. What you do is you own a mortgage and you're allowed to live in there while you're still paying it off. That's the good part. Okay, bottom line. Here are some percentages you want to write down because we're going to use them in a moment. What they'll suggest is, first of all, check to see what your monthly gross income is. That's before anything's taken out. Get 28% of that, and that should be the top amount you should be giving yourself for a mortgage payment. Don't go over 28%. So this times this will tell you what the maximum is that you should have for a mortgage payment. In addition to that, don't spend any more than 36% on things like how much you owe, including mortgage payments, car payments, credit card, all these other things. So this 28% is part of this, and your limit should be 36% for all of these things that you are borrowing on. What is the most you can afford? Let's see where you would fit in. Pick a place. Let's suppose you graduate and you get a job for $40,000. What's the biggest mortgage payment you should be taking on? $933. If someone offers you a good deal and says, I'll give you a mortgage and you only have to pay $1,000 a month, too much. Keep under that $933 and make sure that plus what you owe on your credit cards and your car loans, all the rest, doesn't come to more than $1,200. If you can't keep it under $1,200, then skip the house for right now. These are tried and true percentages. If you like, you could put this away somewhere, and when you get to the point where you think you're going to go for buying a house, you could take a look at these. Or just remember those percentages. 28% for the mortgage, 36% for the mortgage plus the other obligations you've got. So let's take a look at, well, I picked 40,000, but let's suppose you're at 25,000, or someone is, and maybe you're giving them some advice. What's the maximum they should go for on a mortgage payment? What's the maximum they should have on all their credit obligations, including the mortgage? That's not in addition to the mortgage, that's including the mortgage. If it's 80% of the maximum you can afford, what's the maximum you could spend each month for all other debt? Round everything to nearest dollar, because just for these calculations, the nearest dollar is close enough. So, for $25,000, how much of a mortgage payment can we afford? $25,000. That means every month you're bringing in a gross of $2,083, and your mortgage payment should be no more than 28% of that. So 28% of the $2,083 gross per month, that's the maximum you should afford for a mortgage payment. How about all of your credit obligations? We'll do basically the same thing, except we'll go 36% this time. Remember, this is the mortgage plus your loan payments, plus your car payments, credit card payments, all those together. Those payments should not exceed $750 if this is what your annual income is. Next, how much should you spend each month for all other debt? Well, 80% of that 583 is $466. We said the monthly debt should not exceed $750, so subtract those, and your other credit obligation should not go over $284. I know it might sound tough, it might sound awfully tight, but this is going to keep you out of a lot of trouble. Now, we'll talk, this is about home ownership, but it's also about options too. How about renting instead? Maybe straight out of school you can't afford to buy a house, you have no down payment ready, to say nothing of points. So maybe you should rent for a while, maybe permanently. You don't have any down payment, no points, very mobile. You can easily relocate. If you have a home, you have to sell it, and it gets complicated. With the renting, all you have to do is worry about the lease permits. It doesn't tie up hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're renting. And most people would say you should only buy a house because you want to live in it, not because you want to fund your retirement. Also, it doesn't clutter what you can afford for your total monthly payments. You don't have any mortgage payments at all. Now you do have the rent payments, but quite often they might be smaller. And you don't have the upkeep. You don't have the insurance and so on that you would with owning a home. What else? Well, you might actually have lower monthly expenses because you don't have a mortgage, taxes, no, insurance. You might have homeowner's insurance, but actually it's a renter's insurance. And you don't have the upkeep. If something happens to the refrigerator, you tell your lender, or you tell the person who's loaning you, the person who's renting you the house, and they can replace the refrigerator. It's their responsibility and not yours. Also, if you're renting, sometimes in some places there might be pools or tennis courts, health clubs. And if housing prices are going down, you don't have to worry about it. Home repair? Nope. Just call the person who's renting it. Maintenance? Nope. You have to be concerned about whether the heat pump is working? Nope. That's someone else's responsibility. Groundskeeping? Well, that can go two ways. They might keep all the grounds, or maybe if you're renting a house, as I am right now, we take care of the groundskeeping. But that's up to you and the renter as to how you're going to arrange that. Next, no property taxes on the house or the place where you own. Usually it's less costly buying a home than staying in it fewer than 3 years. So if you plan to only be there less than 3 years, probably buying a home isn't the best idea. Next, the benefits. It's not all bad. You do have peace of mind and stability. It's your place. You do get income tax advantages, deductions of mortgage insurance. You get to write off property taxes, and the rent doesn't go up over time if you have a fixed rate. It gives you a chance to remodel. You can landscape. You can redecorate because it's your place, even though you haven't paid it off quite yet. Also, you build up equity. If you went to sell it, part of what you build up, you would get back when you sell it. Say you sell it 15, 20 years later, you can get some of that back because you have part of it paid off, and if everything continues, you should get some of that back. Also, if you look at 7-year time frames, the total cost of renting is more than twice the cost of buying for homeowners. But it takes a while for that to happen. And it's for homeowners who itemize their tax deductions, which can be a nuisance if you're trying to do your own income taxes. All right, that is it for this time. Give that some consideration. Think before you go ahead and buy a house. Oops, going back again. So think before you jump. Make sure you make the decision that's right for you. You take care of yourself, and we'll see you in the next lesson where we'll wrap up Chapter 8. Goodbye.